Life on Earth may recover from a dramatic climate shift, but humans might not survive. That is a sobering conclusion from a UN report, and it confirms what many scientists have been saying in the last few years. Climate change is happening faster and hitting us harder than expected. Early models predicted that it was unlikely we would see the worst consequences before the year 2100. But according to the report, that could be the reality when a child born today turns 30. Currently, the world has already warmed by 1 degree Celsius. On current trends, we are heading for 3 degrees of warming. But even if the world sticks to the ideal 1.5 degree target, the UN climate body says that conditions will change beyond our ability to adapt. 350 million people living in urban areas will be exposed to severe drought, ravaging crops. Millions more will suffer from malnutrition, while coastal communities will be at risk from floods and deadly storms. The report also warns that these changes could be irreversible and lead to cascading impacts, with some regions experiencing multiple calamities at once. The report was not due to be released until February of 2022, but was leaked to the media. This as world leaders prepare for the COP26 climate summit later in November, described as potentially a make or break moment for the planet.
This desert wasteland in southern Madagascar was once arable and fertile, but years of drought mean only a few patches of green remain. The lack of water has destroyed crops, and sandstorms cover whatever's left in a layer of dust. The food here has nearly run out. Many families are forced to eat insects or leaves to survive.
In the morning, I prepare this plate of insects. I clean them up as best I can, given there's almost no water. My children and I have been eating this plant every day for 8 months because we have nothing else to eat and no rain to allow us to harvest what we have sown.
Aid groups are warning of catastrophe, especially for children like these two, now orphans after their mother died of hunger. Their arms are wasting away, while their stomachs are bloated by malnutrition.
I rely on God. Today we have absolutely nothing to eat except cactus leaves that we are trying to clean up. We have nothing left. Their mother is dead and my husband is dead. What do you want me to say? Our life is all about looking for cactus leaves again and again to survive.
Madagascar's southern region is the epicentre of the crisis. More than 1 million people, about half of the area's population, need food aid. And the coronavirus pandemic has made everything worse, slowing the delivery of much-needed supplies. Many of these women and children have walked for hours to get help.
We're facing the worst drought in over 40 years. And this is an area where people depend on their own agriculture, homegrown school meals, smallholder farmers. This is how they live down here. But with drought, back to back to back, people can't survive. And so the government, partnering with the World Food Program and others, we're doing the best we can. But it's a terrible situation.
Poor rains during this year's planting season suggest yet another harvest will fail. The UN's food agency says the world must act now, or a generation could be lost to famine.
This underwater trove of colourful reefs serve as refuge and habitat to some of the most diverse marine species on the planet. Australia's Great Barrier Reef boasts 1/3 of the world's coral population, but it's under threat, and so too is the wildlife that relies on it. The Eastern Pacific Ocean is heating up fast. Since the mid-90s, this has caused the death of half of the reef, and has led to UN officials recommending it to be placed on a list of World Heritage Sites considered in danger. But the Australian government isn't happy about it.
Countries, including European countries, have got strong views about what policies different countries should have on climate change. And I understand that as well. But this is not the convention in which to have those conversations.
Last year, the reef recorded its highest sea surface temperature since records began in 1900. When the ocean heats up, corals expel algae that causes them to bleach. Only the most resilient survive. UNESCO has called for the in danger listing to be adopted at its next World Heritage Committee meeting. but it's the second time that it's tried to add it to the list.
We want to go now to Larry Sproul this morning in southwest Detroit. Larry, how are things looking there since we last talked to you?
Well, pretty much, Grant, the same exact thing as we left. There are fire trucks here that are trying to save people that were stuck in their cars here behind me in southwest Detroit. Joining me live right now is Oscar. Oscar, he was inside that silver truck when his truck got stuck. Oscar, can you just tell us exactly what happened earlier this morning?
I was on my way back home trying to get my kids safe, you know, after trying to train with you know, a friend of mine, and I see, you know, I have an open spot. I crossed through it one time, and we fell asleep from about 2 in the morning to about 30 minutes ago, and then my kids are waking up saying they're scared. So I'm like, you know, I had no option but to come back around, and I was like, hopefully if I get over on the other side of Verner, I can be able to, you know, I got other people that stay around. But, you know, things happen, and I'm glad. I mean, I got my kids next to me saying, hey, papi, I'm scared, and it's 3 of them. My wife is pregnant. There's no option I had. I just wanted to get them safe, you know.
Somewhere deep beneath this rubble, a fire is making the near impossible task of finding survivors even more difficult.
If you were there the morning after, you didn't see it smoldering like it is now. I mean, the stench is very, very thick, and it obviously has created, you know, quite an obstacle.
The search for life was briefly paused to allow firefighters to dig a protective fire trench. They still don't know what's burning or if the smoke is toxic, yet they press on.
The biggest thing here is hope. That's what's driving us right now.
In reality, the likelihood of finding more survivors in the rubble diminishes with each passing hour. The agonized families are waiting in a nearby hotel for news of their loved ones who were likely in bed on Thursday when the building collapsed in the middle of the night.
You know, I'm concerned about my mom. I wonder if she was sleeping. I wonder if she got woken up. You know, she didn't call any of us. Her phone's goes to voicemail.
Investigators say it may take months to determine what caused the collapse, but a recently surfaced engineering report on the building may contain some answers. Commissioned by the building's management 3 years ago, the report found major structural damage to the building's steel and concrete support and a major error in construction, trapping water around the underground garage. Multi-million-dollar repairs had been scheduled to begin soon.
We are obviously very interested in all of the evidence that's coming to light, and we're going to be including it in our what happens after the rescue. And in the meantime, we're taking actions to make sure that other buildings are safe.
The county has announced an immediate government review of all older buildings. The picturesque island on which the seaside residences sit is partially man-made and may be sinking, and now is the site of devastation. Heidi Jo Castro, Al Jazeera, Surfside, Florida.
Joining us now with more is Surfside Commissioner Charles Kessel. Commissioner Kessel, welcome. What more can you tell us about the situation on the ground in Surfside? How are the rescue efforts going?
Well, this morning I met with some of the family members who are waiting to hear news of their missing loved ones. And it's just so painstakingly slow that I really feel for them. Every minute is an eternity. As the Miami-Dade Fire Rescue continue to be very deliberate and careful and safe in their execution of trying to locate people alive. It's a really tough situation, exacerbated by the rain. But the site is not entirely stable, of course. And yesterday they had, through audio and sniffing dogs, you know, identified some areas where they hope to find people alive, and they're using that baseline as a roadmap to continue to move forward today. Obviously, with the more heavy mechanical equipment coming in last night.
And as of this moment, can you tell us how many survivors have been rescued?
The survivor number, I believe, you know, and I'm glad that you asked that question. I'm not sure about the exact number of survivors, but survivors who made it out of the building that's still standing, that section of the building, right? Their stories are incredible. The survivors that were at the edge of the precipice as the building shredded and collapsed. I remember talking to a family where they assisted an elderly woman to get through the rubble because the emergency exit door was jammed at the street level. So let's not forget about those stories, and hope that there are more. Pardon me. Hope there are more survivors, in the sense of survivors from the collapse and the rubble, and because that's what we're hoping for, what we're praying for, but what we have not really seen to this point, other than the first two that were taken out immediately after the collapse, and of course one of those, a woman died.
Day 3 of search and rescue with little to show for it. As emergency personnel combed the rubble of a collapsed 12-story condominium building outside Miami Saturday, they struggled not only against a mountain of debris, but also against a fire that broke out deep within the pile, thwarting efforts to extinguish it or even find its source. Local leaders say they're still not giving up hope of finding survivors.
We are continuing our search and rescue because our first responders believe there's still a possibility. There are crevices, so there's air. They're able to, pick through. But right now, obviously, we're trying to stabilize the situation because of the fire and the smoke.
The Champlain Towers South caved in early Thursday morning. Several residents are confirmed dead, while scores remain unaccounted for. The 40-year-old building was undergoing maintenance ahead of structural recertification. On Saturday, though, the city of Surfside released a 2018 engineering consultants report that warned of major structural damage to the concrete slab under the complex's pool deck due to failed waterproofing, along with extensive cracks among support beams in the parking garage. Analysts say the report should have triggered urgent repairs. Survivors want answers.
If this could have been preventable, and we have lost so many lives and so many family members and so many people grieving, we definitely need answers.
The fallen condo has a twin building nearby. Officials are now organizing an emergency inspection to ensure its safety.
Crews say a fire burning in the wreckage of Thursday's deadly building collapse is slowing the search for survivors. Part of the 12-story building collapsed early Thursday morning in the city of Surfside outside of Miami. Rescuers found a few survivors shortly after the building fell, but since then they have not pulled anyone out alive. Officials say crews have been digging trenches to find and isolate the source of the fire at the scene. The work is incredibly difficult. Move too slow, and the chances of finding survivors disappears.
For the very latest, let's go to the Ethiopian capital, Addis Ababa. Our correspondent Maria Gerth-Nicolescu is standing by to talk to us. Maria, first of all, what can you tell us about the military's justification for this strike?
Well, a spokesperson for the Ethiopian military, the Colonel Getnet Adane, said that the airstrike did not target any market or any civilian populations. He said that the attack by the federal army was aiming precisely at Tigrayan soldiers that were reportedly dressed as civilians and that had gathered in the small town of Togoga on Tuesday. However, some medical sources in Mekele are saying that the more than 60 injured people that have come from Togoga to Mekele and that are currently being treated in hospitals in Tigray's capital are indeed civilians, including infants. Right after the attack, several ambulances were blocked at checkpoints for many hours, which considerably delayed the evacuation of victims. Dozens of people have likely died in this attack, but currently the area is still very difficult to access, so it's difficult to establish a definite death toll. But this attack could be one of the deadliest attacks against civilians since this conflict started in November. So far, the Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has not commented on the airstrike. The UN expressed its concern and called for an investigation.
And Maria, we know the fighting in Tigray has been getting worse in recent weeks. Tell us, in your knowledge, what the situation is like for many civilians there at the moment.
Yes, fighting reportedly intensified over the past few days, with Tigrayan forces claiming some victories, but more general in Tigray over the past 8 months. It's not the first time that civilians are being targeted. If you go to hospitals all over the Tigray region, there are many people that are injured with bullets through airstrikes or other injuries. There have also been reported massacres by Eritrean forces and gang rapes, and then there's the humanitarian situation. The population is suffering of widespread malnutrition. Organizations are also warning of a possible famine, but Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed said that there's no hunger in Tigray. He says humanitarian aid is reaching millions of people. The Ethiopian government has repeatedly said that it has control over the situation in Tigray and that fighting is very sporadic in the region at the moment.
All right, Maria Gerth-Nicolescu for us there in Addis Ababa. Thank you very much indeed.
Working from the shadows, part of a new life in exile. This journalist from Myanmar is hiding in Thailand, having fled the military regime at home.
We can work here, but like we are still in prison. We cannot go anywhere. We get our information.
She'd spent 9 years here after fleeing a previous military crackdown. Then she was able to get legal status. This time, she had to cross the border illegally.
10 years ago, in Thailand, no military government. Now military government, that is very different.
Earlier this month, 3 journalists from the Democratic Voice of Burma were quickly sentenced and deported after being arrested in the northern Thai city of Chiang Mai. Without the swift intervention of a third nation, they could have been returned to Myanmar, potentially facing lengthy jail terms. But journalists inside Myanmar are now faced with little choice. This reporter live-streamed his arrest as soldiers fired into his house. 87 journalists have been arrested since the coup, many facing charges under a special section of the Penal Code for making claims that could damage public tranquility. Even those operating with legal status are concerned that the generals in Thailand could be getting too friendly with their counterparts in Myanmar.
This really make many people fear of arrested and also to be deported. So that's why the people who arrive here and without any documents, they really have to live with low profile.
Security has been increased on the long and porous border, but it remains relatively easy to cross. Thailand has kept a tight control on its borders since the military coup in Myanmar, not only because it's concerned about a flood of refugees coming across, but also because of fears that COVID-19 could come with them. But the coronavirus is unlikely to be the only reason these soldiers are trying to sniff out dissident journalists who've slipped across into Thailand. Tony Cheng, Al Jazeera, on the Thai-Myanmar border.
Libyan Prime Minister Abdul Hamid Dbeibah attending UN-sponsored talks in Berlin aimed at finding lasting peace for his war-torn country. His foreign minister was hopeful that progress had been made on Western demands to withdraw an estimated 20,000 foreign fighters from Libyan territory.
We have a progress in terms of mercenaries, so hopefully within coming days, mercenaries will both sides will going to be withdrawal. And I think this is going to be encouraging and will build the trust measurement from both sides, and then other steps will follow.
Germany warned that the withdrawal of foreign troops was a delicate balancing act.
When it comes to the sequencing, we all know this withdrawal of foreign forces will have to be done bit by bit.
Libya descended into chaos after the toppling of dictator Muammar Gaddafi in 2011. It's since been split between 2 rival political and military factions: the internationally recognised Government of National Unity in Tripoli, which is supported by Turkey, and the Russian-backed Libyan National Army, led by strongman Khalifa Haftar, who controls much of the south and east. A ceasefire was agreed last October, but progress has since stalled. Ahead of the talks on Wednesday, the US Secretary of State said elections must go ahead as planned in December. While Libya's foreign minister said progress had been made in Berlin, a final communiqué from the conference specified no concrete new measures.
In what's been dubbed the rainbow row, the European Commission is stepping up its criticism of Hungary's new anti-LGBTQ law.
The Hungarian bill is a shame. This bill clearly discriminates against people on the basis of their sexual orientation. And it goes against all the values, the fundamental values of the European Union.
In a statement, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán slammed the comments as shameful and based on false allegations. The escalating tensions stem from a law passed by Hungarian parliament last week banning content portraying or promoting homosexuality or sex reassignment to anyone under 18. The legislation has sparked protests at home and condemnation abroad. More than a dozen EU member states have called on the European Commission to take legal action by referring the matter to the European Court of Justice.
Also erstmal halte ich dieses Gesetz für falsch und auch mit meiner Vorstellung von Politik nicht vereinbar. Über die Vertragsverletzungsverfahren entscheidet die Kommission.
Meanwhile, the spat has also spilled over into sports. With the European Football Championship underway, Munich had called for lighting up its stadium in rainbow colors ahead of Wednesday's match there between Germany and Hungary. But UEFA rejected the request, describing itself as a politically neutral organization. Instead, it added the rainbow to its logo. Rights groups have nonetheless condemned UEFA's decision, while Munich and cities across Germany have countered by flying the pride flag.
It's another sharp rebuke by the Biden administration against China. The US has banned imports and restricted exports from 5 Chinese companies over alleged forced labor in Xinjiang. That's where the Chinese government has been accused of committing a genocide against Muslim Uyghurs and other minorities. The US Department of Labor has also added polysilicon, a material used to build solar panels, to its list of goods produced by child or forced labor.
These actions demonstrate our commitment to imposing additional costs on the People's Republic of China for engaging in cruel and inhumane forced labor practices and ensuring that Beijing plays by the rules of fair trade as part of the rules-based international order.
Meanwhile, China has criticized the ban.
中方将采取一切必要措施，坚决维护中国企业的合法权益。中方对美方基于谎言和虚假信息制裁中国企业表示强烈谴责。
About 45% of polysilicon used in solar panels comes from Xinjiang. The devices are currently in huge demand as the world seeks to transition to clean renewables in the fight against climate change. Biden himself is hoping solar panels will replace fossil fuels and allow the US to eliminate carbon emissions from power generation by 2035.
At this Santiago inoculation center, Luis Salinas takes his daughters to be vaccinated. But when they're told that the only vaccine available is CoronaVac, they change their mind.
Infections keep spreading. Hospitals are full. This vaccine is not what they promised. We want the vaccine they have in Europe and the US, where cases are dropping.
With that, they leave, like many others who came here to ask if the Pfizer vaccine was available. Chile became the envy of the region in January when it was able to purchase millions of doses of CoronaVac made by China's Sinovac laboratory. 65% of the target population has now been fully vaccinated, one of the highest rates globally. Yet unlike in the US, where infections dropped with inoculations, here they remain dangerously high. Epidemiologist Sandra Cortés concedes CoronaVac is not the silver bullet it was made out to be.
A large number of the population is inoculated with a vaccine that's not the most efficient to prevent transmission or prevent infection, but rather to reduce the number of deaths from COVID-19.
Data just out indicates that 37% of Chileans who are currently in critical care units were fully vaccinated. In recent weeks, elderly patients in ICUs have jumped from 10 to 15%. And to make matters worse, the health ministry has confirmed a case of the first person to enter Chile from the US infected with the Delta variant. Borders will remain closed for at least another 3 weeks.
We know that this variant is extremely contagious, so we have to be very much on alert to determine how to proceed.
On the upside, experts insist the Sinovac vaccine has significantly reduced mortality, is widely available here, and has little or no side effects. Professor Susan Bueno says the key is to vaccinate everyone.
We can have a very, very high quality, high effective vaccine, but this vaccine is not available to the whole population. It's not going to work either.
And with only a very limited number of Pfizer, Moderna, or AstraZeneca vaccines available, the consensus is that any of the WHO-approved vaccines, like Sinovac, is better than none. Lucia Newman, Al Jazeera, Santiago.
People living in the village of BAHLA take visitors here. They say gas flaring from oil production decimated their generations-old palm trees, leaving behind nothing but trunks. When we met the village elders, they said everyone knows someone who is diagnosed with or who has died from cancer.
I already have cancer and only God helps me. We continue to be worried about our families and loved ones.
The Basra Health Department in southern Iraq says the pollution from oil production is making people and animals in the area sick. The Iraqi High Commission for Human Rights says due to the high rate of cancer in Basra, it's demanding the government work with oil companies to combat pollution.
There is no stability for 6 or 7 years. Every 2 years there is some challenge, political challenge, security challenge. Gas is long-term investment. It needs some stability, and it needs some cash and commitment.
The World Bank ranks Iraq number 2 behind Russia when it comes to gas flaring. Instead of polluting the air, the gas could be recovered and sold, or used to generate electricity for millions of people. The Basra Gas Company is investing $3 billion to do just that at the Rumaila oil field, Iraq's largest.
Anything that the Iraqi government can do or its neighbours can do to create a stable environment is good for capturing more gas and for creating a better environment for the Iraqi people.
The people of Bahla say the land their families have been tied to for 200 years is toxic, and they wonder how many more of them will get sick before the government can help them. Natasha Ghanem, Al Jazeera, Basra, Iraq.
After a successful test flight last week, the company behind spaceship Neptune has sold more than 200 tickets for flights in its space balloon. If all goes to plan, the journeys starting in 2024 will involve a 2-hour ascent above 99% of the Earth's atmosphere. Passengers will spend 2 hours on the very edge of space before the balloon makes its descent to the ocean.
I think you've probably seen lots of pictures of rockets launching, and that's not how I would describe that, right? They're high Gs. This is completely the opposite. So you're going to space at about 12 miles an hour. So you're going to space at the speed of cycling. That allows the vehicle to be very smooth and gentle, and the capsule itself is very roomy.
Ignition and liftoff.
Space Perspective is in competition with companies including Virgin Galactic's Richard Branson and SpaceX Elon Musk for the space tourism market, but it says it's offering something different. Virgin Galactic charges passengers up to $250,000 for 6 minutes of weightlessness. Space Perspective says its trips cost half that price and last 6 hours, but without the zero-gravity experience. It says there's enough demand for everyone and predicts a booming industry in the years ahead.
We did our own study with a world-renowned marketing company, a marketing research company, and they said the total addressable market for the kind of flights that we're doing is on the order of 250 billion. Cowen, Virgin have done their own studies for this kind of what's called suborbital flight. They're saying it's 500 billion to 700 billion, whatever the right number is. The market is huge.
And if you can afford the sky-high prices, it promises to be a trip that's out of this world. Victoria Gatenby, Al Jazeera.